Yeah. And we are joined here today by Alyssa, 2021 NPC, National Physique Committee, Eastern USA Championship competitive bodybuilder. She competed in the wellness category, novice class A and class open A, where she placed first and second, respectively. How's it going, Alyssa?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. Thanks for coming on to the show and listening to the first episode of the podcast and reaching out to us for coming on. I guess our first question would have to be how you got involved in bodybuilding as a sport.
I was into the gym after I had my kids. I was one of those like cardio bunnies. I did like P90X at home, beach body stuff. And then I realized that I wanted to put a little bit more muscle on. And then I started going to the gym. Then I got a little bit more interested in nutrition. And I actually went to school to become a personal trainer to help me with competing because I just decided one day to just see if I could do it. I gave myself a 5 year timeline to compete for the first time. And I told a known bodybuilding coach in my gym that like I was interested in it. And he goes, okay, you have until the end of the year. And I started working with him. I did a little bit of a bulk and then I went right into my first show, which was not the 2021 show. I did a show back in 2019, which was called the Brooklyn Grand Prix. I also didn't compete wellness at that show because it wasn't here in the States yet. So I had done bikini. Same two classes, not the same placings though.
Okay, all right. And so, just to just to kind of focus in on what you said, so you got into the idea of training because you wanted to do bodybuilding?
No, I wanted to lose the baby weight. After I had my
Okay,
son,
okay.
I was young and selfishly, vainly, I wanted my body back. So
Yeah,
I got in the gym.
that's quite all right. Yeah.
Yeah. And after being in the gym for a little bit, I was like, okay, I like building muscle. I like trying to like get stronger. Um, and I actually found an influencer, which was kind of funny that your first podcast was about that. I found an influencer online who was a competitor. And honestly, I just really liked her physique. And I was like, I want to look like that one day. Like, that's a goal. Um, and then that's when I started training with intent to compete.
Now, the person that you
Okay,
reached out
gotcha.
to, were they an influencer, a coach, or competed themselves?
Um, Kind of a little bit of both. She actually is a coach and she was my coach for a little while after my first show. But I reached out to her because she is, as far as my knowledge, and still claims that she was a natural athlete. For my first show, I was also. And so that was the allure of like, if she could do it without having to do anything, PED, steroids, anything like that, whatever you want to call it. I consider
Naughty
all of it the same
sauce?
stuff, PEDs, gear, steroids. It all means the same thing in the bodybuilding world. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah.
It's all the same. But because she had done it naturally, I was like, oh, maybe this is something I could do too. Um, so
So how did that first show turn out for you?
so I placed third in, I don't remember if it was novice or my open class. I placed third in one of my classes. Um, and I placed, I think, sixth or fifth in my other.
Okay. And how long did you train for that?
I'd say probably about like a year and a half from like start to finish,
Okay.
including my prep, which is usually about like 18 to 20 weeks for me personally.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you did your first show. You weren't terribly ecstatic with the results that you got. Is that what kind of led you to the decision to start PEDs or?
Um, I am actually very anti PED, which is
Okay.
funny. So that's why I wanted to do it naturally. Um, but a main thing for me, I competed bikini for my first class, which is a naturally smaller stature. And if you know me personally, I'm little, but like I'm not super tiny. So I had to diet really, really hard for my first show. And I'm not saying that competing, you don't have to diet hard. But I also didn't have enough muscle maturity, things like that. And when I came into the show, I didn't come in lean enough. All the things that you learn at your first show, like it's a starting point, right? But even still, at my leanest, I looked significantly larger on my bottom half than the other bikini competitors. And one of the expediters at the show, like the guys who stand backstage and kind of walk you out, he looked at me and he goes, "There's a lot of wellness girls here," and kind of like tilted his head. And that actually planted the idea in my head of doing a different category. Because I just kind of didn't fit. I was trying to make a round peg fit in a square hole, so to speak, with doing a smaller class than what my body likes to hold.
Okay.
So that being said, I was too small for wellness. So that's where it came into play, where if I wanted to compete and be competitive, also I'm older. I've been training for a very long time before I decided that I was going to start bodybuilding.
Yeah.
So I naturally hit my plateau. I'm in my 30s. I've been training for 10 plus years. Not the right way.
Nothing wrong with being in your 30s, by the way.
What?
Nothing wrong with being in your 30s,
Yeah,
by the
I
way.
mean, it's a little harder to put on size when you get older. But yeah, I hit my plateau in a lot of respects. Like my diet was pretty good. My training was hard. I still am stronger than a lot of guys in the gym. Sorry. But I just wasn't progressing the way that I really needed to be able to compete and be competitive. So it was a decision for me. And I think that there's a misconception about PED use. I think people automatically think like, if you're using anything, you're like sticking a needle in your butt or like doing all this crazy stuff. It's not the case.
No, yeah. I and there's also this this like villainous like nature that comes, like everybody assumes like you're, you know, for lack of a better term, you're like a cheater, right? You're and in the world of competitive bodybuilding, it's not cheating if the entire playing field is taking part in it.
Exactly.
So you're the one who's missing out, kind of, if you're not, right? You're not going to be able to stand up to everybody else who's competing because they are all enhanced, and you cannot compete with people who are enhanced. There's just no natural way to catch up to them.
The amount of work that they put in is going to be just generally higher than someone who's not on gear. And you could work as hard as you want, but the fact that it heals quicker lets you do more work, or even less work with the same results.
And if they're putting in the same amount of work as you, then forget it. Then you have absolutely no shot. And they all are. And that's the other thing too. I think with any kind of steroid use, people assume that like, oh, well, they're just taking steroids, that's why they look like they do. No, they are still working extremely hard in the gym. And that's why they look the way they do. You could take it and still see results, but to see those kind of results, you still got to put in the work. Yeah, absolutely.
Keeping it on the eye, I work harder now that I'm on it, because for me, in my mind, if I'm going to do this to my body, I'm going to get the absolute most out of the absolute minimum. So some of it is like placebo effect. I'm not going to lie. Like knowing that you're doing this gives you that little extra push to go heavier or whatever the case is. But there are definitely very physical parameters on what's placebo and what's actually happening physiologically.
Sure. Do you mind going into detail specifically what you have taken?
Sure. So wow, I've never actually like outwardly said it. There's like two people who actually know. So like I was saying before, I think people automatically presume that it's like needle in the butt type stuff, but there's hormonal enhancements, and then there's like oral things that you could take that are basically considered fat burners, but they're illicit. So they just help you get like a little tighter and a little leaner, especially as a female. So the first thing that I did for my off season for this show and like up into my show was two main ones are Anavar and Clen, or clenbuterol. They're very, very, and I just want to backtrack for a second too. unfortunately, there are a lot of people who will take those things, and because they're orals, they'll consider themselves natural still because they haven't injected.
Yeah.
Which I think is ridiculous. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's actually completely ridiculous. And if you're doing anything, even a diuretic, like I consider you
Technicality.
an enhanced athlete. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's what do you
It's
call it?
still
It's
going
like
to
a
be
way for them
performance
to
enhancing if it's not a needle.
give themselves like this, like, well, this is okay because it's not as serious as the real stuff, right? And that's not the case because it is the real stuff. How it's affecting you internally
very real.
isn't going to change.
Though.
Yeah.
And pills are actually harder on your system and your body than other things are. But then there's like that huge like jump to using injectables, right? Like that people are concerned with. And I'm just going to out it. I had a coach for my last show who was not the same coach that I had for my first show. I've had 3 coaches total in the course of my competing career. My coach who got me through my first show, who I parted ways with after. The coach that actually made me want to start bodybuilding in the first place that I reached out to online, who was natural. And then the coach that I had for my last show. I am now currently back working with my coach from my first show. And if you want, we could get into the why behind that. But the coach for my last show, having zero knowledge on PED use, or really what anything did, and just kind of going by people I knew in the sport, whatever the case was, the things that I just named are very common names, if you know anything about steroid use. And so she told me to take these things, and I was like, okay, no problem. We did slow increases, whatever the case was. I didn't really know enough about it. I put blind faith, which a lot of people do in a coach.
Yep.
Without really, I don't want to say I didn't do my due diligence. I knew what the side effects were. I knew what the case was, but I didn't know anything about dosaging or the fact that as a 115-pound female, she was pumping me with stuff that men double my size should be taking amount wise.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Q being back with my first coach, he kind of saved me. He saw what was going on and he helped me out. So, it was eye-opening to me, and my hormones were all over the place. I was like, I would cry at the drop of a hat. I didn't really know, like weird things were going on.
Sure.
But that being said, orals are very hard on like your kidneys, your liver, just processing them, breaking them down. So my coach now, I do inject. I do not take orals, and I am on the absolute minimum of something called Primo. Basically, it gives you all of the same positive effects as Anavar as far as like building small strength gains, mainly keeping your muscle mass, quicker recovery times between your training sessions, because like any competitor is really, if they're doing it for real, they're beating themselves up in the gym every time they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the recovery time is a huge aspect of it now.
Yep.
So currently what, having gone over briefly in our podcast about the side effects of using steroids and the negative health effects, are there any steps you might be taking to mitigate those side effects? Or?
Yes. So the coach I'm working with now, he's awesome. He is a competitor himself. He's been in the industry for 30 years. He's an awesome, awesome human. And he helped me take the reins of the end of my prep for my show and showed up for me to peak me for my show day, not even putting me through my off season or anything. So kudos to him for literally saving me, physically saving my body, just by noticing that like shit was going awry just from seeing me in the gym. But blood work, my other coach didn't require blood work. My coach now required blood work before I even started anything. He made sure that I got healthy, and he did a PCT, which is a post-cycle therapy. So he put me through something to clear out my receptors, to clear out my kidneys, to clear out my liver from any toxins that might still be in my body before he even considered putting me on anything, and explained to me all the damage that I actually had done to my kidneys and my liver by taking the dosages that I was taking of the orals that I was taking.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge, huge thing that people overlook is, I'm not Mr. Anti-steroid where I'm going to preach that nobody should ever take steroids. It is absolutely a personal choice. But if you're gonna do it, you should absolutely do it the right way. You can talk to your doctors, let them know what you're considering using. They're not going to prevent you from doing it. They'll warn you against it. They'll say, it has these kinds of side effects, but if you're going to do it, let's do it the healthiest way you possibly can, to avoid or at least slow down any side effects that might occur. Or having an experienced coach, like you mentioned, who can kind of walk you through that process versus the young population that's seeing these influencers on social media or in magazines, whatever the case may be. When they're seeing them and they're just like, oh, they're taking this, so I'm going to take this. And that's all they're doing. They're just, handfuls, like, oh, just, pop 3 of these, see what happens. And that's it's just the worst thing you could possibly do.
Yeah, well, the problem with that is that they're just selling their physical body as what they are, and they're not disclosing what they're taking. They're not being truthful about the doses that they're taking in, and all they're doing is trying to use it to push their own product and make money instead of be truthful
but
to their audience.
That brings us to what we were actually talking about having the no accountability factor, right? By them taking this stuff and people seeing the results that they achieved and then trying to follow what they're doing, but not knowing all the stuff that's involved in it that you mentioned earlier, all the detox that goes into it and everything.
Some side effects that I personally experienced were major hair loss. Obviously, I said like my emotions were all over the place because my hormones were out of whack, especially as a female. Like little things that you wouldn't even notice, or not wouldn't notice, but wouldn't know to look for, rather, I should say, because of overuse and the I don't know how to say, the relationship between being an influencer and being a coach is very much like this on social media now, because people have a following. So they'll get a textbook, they will pass their whatever personal training certification, and then they'll be like, I'm a coach. But they're actually an influencer, and then they're running you on the programs that they themselves have taken or been taught to take, or they're willing to. And like, listen, I am extremely conservative when it comes to what I'm willing to take now, because of what happened to me after my show and how long it took me to re-regulate after my show. But people don't necessarily have the time and understanding of working with multiple people and multiple bodies. And I understand, like anything, becoming a good personal trainer, becoming a good bodybuilding coach, that all takes time. It takes experience. It takes clients under your belt, so to speak. But when you trust somebody thinking that you're not necessarily a guinea pig, you're actually in safe hands. It's something that happens to a lot of people too, and wind up with, I'm sure that you've seen or spoken to women in the bodybuilding industry, and they have very deep voices. That's also a side effect of certain things that you take too high of dosage, certain things that, just in my opinion, females don't necessarily need to take, but some coaches don't know better, or they push certain things. And people like me thinking like they're safe in their coach's hands. Like you trust your bodybuilding coach with your life, because they're methodically starving you basically at the end of the day. So you have to trust your coach almost wholeheartedly to an extent, and just hope that they don't steer you wrong.
Yeah. And now, from the limited experience that I've had in talking to bodybuilders who have competed professionally, who have also used, I find that in the world of bodybuilding, there is a more openness about PED use versus what you see on Instagram, right? I mean, I could be wrong here, but I've definitely noticed that, when bodybuilders are saying, I've been training for 11 years, I've been competing for 7. Oh, do you use steroids? They look at you like, of course, I'm a competitive bodybuilder. What kind of question is that? So I definitely think in the sport of bodybuilding, there is definitely a more open approach to it. You know, and I think they're actually more willing to talk to each other about it, and I don't think they hide it. You know, they won't come out and necessarily say like, you know, my name is Joe and I take steroids. But if you ask them, they're gonna be like, yeah, I've been competing for 7 years. Of course, I'm in the Mr. Olympia. Like, what do you think? I did that naturally? Like, come on.
Well, the thing about them is that's their profession. That's how they make money.
Yeah.
Their job is
How they make their money.
actually bodybuilding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, whereas something like an influencer is using their body and their fake natty status as a means to
that's the part that
means to push their supplements, and they use. Well, yeah, it's the fact that they're not truthful about what they're actually doing instead of just trying to push their own products.
Yeah.
And that's a little aggravating.
Especially if they're pushing the latest supplement and they're saying like, look at my physique, I take, you know, supplement A, and everybody looks at that person and is going to say, well, great, I need to take supplement A because I want to look like that. But that's not really why he looks like that or she looks like that.
How they get to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand non-disclosure too, because like as a mom, you know, like my kids have no idea, obviously. They are way too young to even understand that. And I don't think I would outwardly tell them unless they asked me directly as they got older. But like you said, in the bodybuilding world, it's very like common knowledge. And there's certain giveaways, especially for females. Like if you get lean, like I got for my show, like you can't do that naturally.
Yeah.
You could be the top 5% in the world and you cannot get that lean without assistance as a female. Your body just will not do it. Like you hit a sticking point.
What was your body fat percentage at the show?
I actually didn't check, but if I had to make an educated, uneducated guess, I would say I was probably somewhere around like 7 or 8%.
Oof. Okay. So like below the healthy levels.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well below. Because for females.
Because I think for a woman, essential is 9%. Yeah. That's wild.
Yes.
That's lean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for men, it's like 3%.
That's wild. That is
but those
wild.
percentage points are pounds. And for women to get that down, those percentages are actually
half pound
like
here, half pound there.
Fractions of pounds.
Yeah. Like my stage weight. So I traveled up to my show. It was in Poughkeepsie, New York. I traveled up to my show then two nights or the night before. And I didn't bring my scale with me because for females, actually, it doesn't matter how much you weigh, which is great. It's really about your physique and what you look like. It's only based off of height for females. Men have weight classes. So for females, it's really not super important. It's just a metric to know like where you're at, if you're on track. So I didn't bring my scale for show day, but the lowest weight that I weighed in at prior to heading up for my show, which was like 3 days out, was the last time I checked. I want to say I was like it was an odd number. So it's 107 or 109.6. My off-season weight was pushing 130. So it's a pretty solid, drastic difference. And even in my off-season, my body fat percentage was still within healthy, like quote unquote athletic female range. So under 30%.
Yeah. And that's, that's not uncommon. I feel like in the world of body, those dramatic swings in weight, you know, guys, the bigger guys, the guys who compete in the larger classes who walk around in the off season at 250 and then they're on stage at 195 and you're like, my God, dude, like, geez. Yeah. And it's like this yo-yo effect. And
liquid almond.
That's tough. It takes a toll.
It does. And inevitably when you're getting that lean, even at your best with like your nutrition is just not optimal for maintaining your muscle mass. So at some point your body does kind of get a little bit catabolic in the sense of utilizing your muscle for fuel because I am still eating 6 meals a day, but in comparison to like what my 6 meals a day are in my off season, they are extremely small.
Yeah.
And oh no, Joe knows all about the almonds. Joe saw me drop almonds on the floor and cry in my first prep because I didn't have any
That's
more.
all I could eat for the next 4 hours.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So yes, it's very, very methodical. It comes down to nutrition timing. Like there's so many factors, obviously, that go into it. But that's the other thing that people don't understand with PED use too. They think it's like this magic pill and they could just do this and like their diet doesn't have to be on point and their training doesn't have to be on point. And yeah, you're
Yep.
going to get results like you guys went over in your first thing. And especially if you're like, if you have a coach who doesn't know what they're doing or is just pumping you full of stuff so that you see results and you want to stay with them. You know, you're going to see results, yes, but your longevity in the sport is very minimal because you're going to burn yourself out from both ends of the candle before you even realize what's happening.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to have a good coach in the sport of bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure that someone is pushing you, giving you the right supplements, not for their own personal gain, but for your health.
The reality of so many people, especially because NPC is not a drug testing federation, and people would argue, oh, if you're so anti-PEDs, why are you in a non-drug testing organization? There are other ones, but the reality is if you want to do this and like really do it, the natural federations are nowhere near like you'll hear about National Federation Olympia style things, but like nothing is on Olympia stage. It doesn't have the glitz and the glam and the allure. Like it's just not the same. The energy, the vibe, you know, I don't know because I don't compete within those federations. So it might be like there might be a lot of camaraderie, things like that. But in my opinion, like people aren't going to do this to their bodies and work as hard as they do if they don't want to be the best. And like, if you're going to compete, why don't you want to be the best? It's just how I look at it.
And the spectators want to see the limit of human capabilities, enhanced or not. Like it doesn't matter. Just they want to see freaks, right?
Yeah.
Like they want to see, as a spectator at any bodybuilding competition, they want to see the biggest dudes, the most defined muscles. They want to see, I mean, just absolutely shredded people where like, you know, every time they take a step you just see muscles flexing and it's I imagine that in order to get there, like you said, there's that pressure of like, well, I'm never gonna get there unless I basically do what everybody else is doing to get there. And now as far as like the pressures go, when did you find at all your social media personally was influenced at all after your use, after your placing in the competition and everything?
No, I'm not big on social media. I don't even have 1,000 followers on my social media. My social media is very like, I don't want to say it's personal because it's a public page, but it's more well versed towards people I've encountered in real life or met or spoken to or like met at shows, things like that.
Okay.
So no, not personally, because I don't have a huge platform. Do I think that other competitors who have larger platforms have way more sway and pull? Absolutely. Which is also kind of like it walks that line on influencer, bodybuilder, disclosure, non-disclosure. And because like you guys were saying before, in the bodybuilding industry, it is kind of openly talked about. And I said before too, like I just presume people know that I'm not a natural athlete anymore because of just certain tells. I don't want to say that people do it harmlessly, but certain, like as far as bodybuilders go, I think that there is a genuine harmless implication that you can look a certain way without disclosing, but not for the purposes of self-gain. You know, like there are a lot of bodybuilders who don't disclose their use, and some people who are uneducated might look at that and be like, oh, well, I could look like that one day too, without really knowing what actually all goes into it.
Yeah. Now, circling back to the beginning a bit here, knowing what you know now, having gone through what you've gone through, the original person that you reached out to who claimed natural, what's your opinion now? Do you still think that's the case?
I
Or
do. Yeah.
okay,
And you know what? I respect the shit out of her too, because you could tell she works hard. You could tell she's naturally like a leaner body type. She's naturally more athletically inclined. But you can see in comparison, so she's a bikini competitor, and you could see in comparison to other IFBB pros that there's certain things like her shoulders are big, but people don't realize how much comes down to posing too, and like knowing your angles, knowing how to work the stage.
yeah,
There's a lot of that plays into it. You can look at my Instagram and I look huge. You see me in person, I'm this big. Like so we know our best side, so to speak. Um,
yeah,
but knowing what I know now, I do actually. I wholeheartedly think that she is a natural
very
athlete,
nice.
which is great. And I don't want to say that in the NPC there's not any natural competitions. They do have certain ones. There's like just off the top of my head, the first one I can think of is Ben Wider's natural competition, and literally natural is in the title. So
Yeah,
if you get on that stage and you're not natural, it's kind of shitty, because the people who
yeah,
are like the genetic one-offs try to stay natural for as long as possible. And like,
sure,
listen,
sure,
if I had the genetics, I would try to stay as natural as possible too, but I want to win.
yeah. Yeah, no, I and genetics plays a huge role in that
There
too.
it is. It's important to win.
Yeah, I want
Yeah,
to win.
yeah, that's what it comes down to, and that's again like there's no reason to ever vilify it. It's just when I talk about the negatives of PED use in terms of profiting off of it, it's just the people that um it's all
And
misrepresentation. It's definitely
I 1,000%
yeah, like
agree with like your disagreement with that. I think that there should have to be just social media in general is rough, especially on the younger kids who think that like they can look a certain way because these people are selling XYZ brand, right?
yeah. And so just for example, there was an ad I saw recently where a
Misrepresenting.
professional bodybuilder was promoting
Just
a nine
disclose it, because you can
supplement
still make
stack.
profit off of
A
disclosing
nine
that
supplement
info.
stack. The average cost of each supplement ranging around $55. And I'm just like you're gonna get some naive person to drop $400 a month so you can make the money because they're like, it's lying in their pocket.
Yep.
But yeah, and it's like, well, take these 9 supplements, but also use PEDs, and then you'll probably look like me.
Yeah. It
They wouldn't need those 9 supplements. Yeah, yeah,
um I I do take a lot of supplements too, though. But again,
For
this is circling back to
$100
like
a
my
month.
health and wellness, because I am on things. But like the 9 supplements I take, yes, I take pre-workout. Yes, I take an intra-workout amino acid, just because
Financially profiting off of
as
their lies.
bodybuilders, we need a little bit more protein and a little bit more things. Do I think essential aminos are necessary for everybody?
But
No,
then
but
they
I think
wouldn't
because of
make
the level to
the
which we
profit
are
off
pushing
of the
ourselves in our
supplements.
workouts, it is something that is beneficial for
They
us
didn't need them.
because of what we're doing. No, no. Yeah, sports
yeah,
specific, exactly. Um, but again, like these people are selling these supplements, and the stuff I take is natural stuff. It's to keep my like my basic multivitamin and all that stuff. Like they're not
yep,
pushing these supplements. So, if it's one thing if you're telling somebody like take your multivitamin every day and take an omega for your joints and like those kind
yeah,
of things, cool. If you have like a brand that
Not
you
general
truly
population,
can
just
stand
sports
behind and say
specific.
that even if somebody's not on a PED and they take these supplements, it's going to increase their quality of life. If you happen to profit off of it, by all means, go ahead and do that. But like you said, when you're selling your physique but not disclosing, I think that that's a terrible thing to do. And
yeah,
keeping it on the eye, if anybody outwardly asked me, I would just tell them, no, I'm not natural. But I also, even people who don't ask, I feel the need, the people that I trust and I'm comfortable with, that know that I bodybuild or whatever the case is, like I have no qualms being like, oh yeah, by the way, like clearly I'm not natural anymore. So there's certain things, and that's just I think anything in life too. Certain people are just better quality of human. But yeah.
So, what advice would you give to an up and comer now who came to you specifically and asked about your use and if if they were considering it, what kind of advice, what path would you steer them there?
Absolutely, under zero circumstances ever before the age of 21. Never. Don't do it. Unless your nutrition, your training, your water, everything has been on point for years and years and years on end, and you are at your body's absolute peak plateau, don't do it. Unless you are genuinely looking to compete for an extended period of time, not just like a one show because I want to do it, don't do it.
Yeah.
If you just want to get big, do not do it. If you're looking to just get lean, do not do it. I want to compete for years. I will be an IFBB pro. I will compete on an IFBB pro stage, and I will be competitive on that stage. This is the difference between why I decided to do things and why other people should not.
Yeah.
And again, like I said in the very beginning, my age plays a factor, which is what fed into it. Also for females, I have 2 kids. I am not looking to have any more children. God forbid something happens to me hormonally, I'm okay. Like, I'm not concerned about not being okay. I don't want to say this and it come off the wrong way. I'm not concerned about not being able to have more kids just because of the fact that I already have them. But this is a real side effect for women who take PEDs. So for women especially, unless you're at your absolute peak physique by nature, don't do it.
Yeah. So, you're in a comfortable place in your life where, like you kind of said, if, you're not trying to have any more kids.
Right.
So, and I understand. And I've actually heard, I've heard people say, reach your maximum potential first and then see where you're at and see how much further you need to be before even considering taking. And I like how you said, if your goal is to make like a semi-career out of this, like you want to compete with the best, that's when you should consider taking it. If you're looking to do it for vanity reasons or for, like you said, like as a one-off, just to compete for the sake of saying you did it, there's really no need to take any PEDs, right? Just work the hardest you possibly can, get the best physique you can naturally, and go up there on stage. And that's a victory in and of itself, right?
Absolutely.
That you're doing what 0.0001% of the population is capable of doing.
Even just down to the diet and the cardio and like the strictness that you have to be when you're on prep. Even as an actual athlete, like you still have to put in all of that work. But for some people, that's just not enough. And that's kind of where I was at. Also, another thing for females too, if you're looking to compete and I'm going to say it and everyone's going to hate me for it. If you are a bikini competitor, unless you are on an IFBB stage, there is zero reason for you to take any performance enhancing drugs. Diet harder, get off your birth control because it's going to make you hold weight that you don't know you're holding. There's a lot of other things that you can do because for bikini class, they're not looking at your symmetry. They're not looking at your body fat percentage. They're not looking at those things. So if you're not sure if you want to compete, that's a really good way of doing it because you can very much hold your own naturally in the bikini class, even if you have to diet hella hard to get lean enough to get on stage with those girls. But I got on stage the first time and that's when I realized like, I want to do this and I want to be successful at this. I knew I wanted to do it before I started, but my coach gave me the opportunity to do things. He said from his professional standpoint, he thinks that I would be able to come in leaner, tighter, look better. And because he knew where my head was with wanting to compete, he gave it as an option for my first show. I said no. He said, okay, that's your choice. That's the difference between a good coach and a coach who's looking to push because they want your title under their name. Or your success under their name.
You're a resume builder for them. Yeah.
So that's another thing to look for too. Like if you're starting with a bodybuilding coach, hire a bodybuilding coach. That's another thing because a coach can coach you through a lot of other ways to not have to use PEDs. But hire a coach and make sure they're not pushing enhancement things on you. And keep in mind, even if they do, it's not a magic pill. PED, performance enhancing drug. However hard you perform in the gym, your usage is going to enhance that. And that.
Yeah. No, I like that, and I love that your coach was open upfront and said, gave you that option and didn't pressure you into it, didn't force you into it. Even after you made the decision, didn't say, "You sure that's the way you want to go?" Because if you were smart, you would juice a little bit,
He
So
said
I think that's
one time, you should do this. I
Yeah.
said no. He said, okay, never spoke about it again.
Okay, great.
That's great. That's what you look for in a coach. You don't want someone who's going to put their own career ahead of your health. That's just what you look for in a coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I spoke to my coach before I decided to use injectables. I am petrified of needles. I actually can't inject myself. I have somebody very close to me do it for me. Because I am petrified of needles. I can't do it. But my fear of failing on stage is smaller than my fear of using. Sorry guys, can you see me?
Yep.
So that's why I decided to do that. But also he gave me the why behind physically what the difference would be if I took the absolute minimum dosage of the injectable that I take versus the plethora of other things that the other coach had me take. And the side effects are actually way more minimal and way more mitigatable than anything that I was on with the last coach.
And I think that's brings us back to something you said earlier when you mentioned people think like, oh, if they're taking the oral stuff, they're not taking the real stuff. Whereas that stuff can be and most likely is way more damaging to your internal organs than the injectables. So like here they are thinking they're like, oh, I'm going the minor league
natural
route.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just lying to themselves to feel better about.
Yeah.
They didn't
like
really
real
do
steroids are injected into your
know?
butt, and it's like, no, real steroids can be taken orally, and they can have terrible effects on your body. So, yeah, it's definitely a big takeaway from that.
There's actually other orals that you could take in a liquid form too that replace the pills that aren't as harsh. And vice versa, anything that's not anything. Most things that are injectable, you can also find in a pill form. But it comes down to how long you want to be in the sport, how you can appropriately PCT from the things you're taking, how much you have to take of them, the amount of time that you're on things. People just take things for literally no reason. Like I know a girl who was going on vacation, so she ran a cycle of Clen. Like that's insane to me. I would never.
Yeah, that's unreal.
But then
unreal.
hypocritically said something to me about the route that I took because I chose not to do orals because I decided to, for my off season, do injectables. But at the end of the day, I'm under very close coach's guidance. I get my blood work done. I get my labs done. I do my due diligence, all of my things. I'm not crash dieting and doing these things. Yeah. It's for a very specific amount of time with a very, very, very minimal dosage. And I could almost guarantee the side effects of me doing this the right way versus her just running something like that because she's going away for vacation and then just dropping off of it, not coming off on a PCT, not clearing her receptors, not doing any of these things is going to be way less damaging the way I'm doing it versus the way that she's doing it.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things that you've mentioned a couple times is the blood work that's being done to monitor. I mean, it's going to be so important because if you're not, you have no idea. You have no idea what's going on internally. Everybody talks about the side effects that you can visibly see. Those are not great. But the ones that are affecting your heart, your liver, those are the ones that are going to kill you in the long run. So
I should piggyback and say blood work and urinalysis. Like a good coach requires both. Because especially for females, there's stuff that shows up in urine that, as far as like your thyroid function, things like that, that you can get from blood work, yes. But there's certain markers that can show up in your urine that would be a quicker indicator of something going south. That if you're not monitoring it, it can get bad fast.
Now, are you seeing a doctor for the blood work?
Yeah, I have like a regular primary care. Unfortunately, bodybuilders require a little bit more blood work than your doctor requires. So we do have to, that's another thing too. Competing is expensive. So, you know, like it's an expensive hobby and it's a hobby. It's a sport, but it's a hobby because at an amateur level, which I'm at, I don't get paid when I win. I get a medal and I get, ladies, put your hands up, and you walk off stage and your 15 seconds of fame is over. So, you know, like it really depends on what you're willing to do and how much you're willing to invest. Like if you're not in it for the long haul, I don't think that PEDs should even be on your radar because and make sure you're not doing PEDs and then like cheaping out on like your posing coach and like your tan and your other things just to make room for your use.
Yeah, definitely.
Penny wise, pound foolish.
So lastly here, do you have an exit strategy in place?
From competing?
Yeah.
Realistically,
so you have
I just got my national qualification. So my next step will be a national stage, which national level placement will kind of decipher where I stack up against other competitors, and how close I am to becoming pro. And I'm getting older. Like bodybuilders aren't old, which people don't understand either. Yes, there's masters, there's other classes that you could do when you're in your later ages, but are you going to turn IFBB pro at like 60, 70 years old? No way. So for me, it's fun for now, but it's a lot of work. And I have 2 young kids and I have 2 jobs and I very much live a normal life. Like I'm not an IFBB pro or an influencer who just sits at their computer and goes to the gym when they want to. Like my day is insane when I'm in prep. I am out of my house for like 12 to 18 hours a day. And people are like, how do you see your kids? And they're in school, relax. I spend time with my kids, but I'm out of my house for that amount of hours a day. So, you know, I get my shit done when my kids are in school and I do my cardio and my training. And listen, sometimes my kids know when mom's in prep, you got to come to the gym for an hour because I got to get my second session of cardio in. And my little man will be right beside me doing walking lunges. And he was my spot in the gym the other day. They're on spring break this week. So balance your life too, but keep in mind there's no balance if you're a competitor. So for me, it's just like the next couple years, while it's still feasible for my life, I don't think my world would crash and burn. Like if you told me today, like, especially for health reasons, like absolutely not, you can't compete anymore, I'd be like, all right, I'll find something else to do. It's not going to change how hard I work in the gym or what I do. It would just change me getting on or off a stage.
It wouldn't be the end of your lifting at all. It would just be the end of competing.
Do
you have a hard cutoff?
What?
Do you have a hard cutoff age-wise?
It depends on how I do at a national show and how hard I have to go.
Fair enough.
I genuinely don't think that I would do it probably after 40, just because of the toll that it takes on my body. But it's easy. It's easy for me to say that now, but who knows? Because my kids will be older then. Maybe it'll be easier for me to prep. Maybe it'll change my mind. Like I don't have a cutoff just because I'm just enjoying it while it lasts, because you never know when it's going to be over. You know, I could get on a national stage and tank and then try one more time and tank again and be like, all right, you know what? Like I'm not willing to push more here or there, or I physically can't do certain things to like get to that level. So it really just depends on what the next step brings for me. But I think I have a different mindset about it than other competitors do. Like I genuinely love it and I'm just doing it for fun, which I know sounds like fucked in the head, but bodybuilders aren't normal. So I'm okay whether I get on stage or not. Like I would run an entire prep, do everything all the way up until like hair, makeup, nails, suit, and then like be totally cool, not even walking on stage, which I feel like a lot of people are not the same way. Like they want that 5 minutes of fame. But I actually, if you look at my Instagram, my eyes are closed in a lot of my pictures because I hate having all eyes on me. So I truly do it for myself. And I think that that's a big misconception in the bodybuilding industry. A lot of people don't. They do it for the social media, for the attention, for what it brings to their platform. But like, would you do it if social isn't there is my biggest question. And that's something I'll ask people too, like younger people. It's a lot.
I mean, most people probably
So,
not, to be honest.
When are nationals?
Hopefully, if my body responds well to this off season, sometime later this year. I'm still I'm in like the midst of a bulk. What's up, summer thick? So I will be packing on the pounds until the end of summer at least. And I will see if I put on enough size in to where I need to be to make the necessary improvements to step on a stage again. If I lose my qualification, I'm back to square one because your qualification only lasts for 1 year.
Okay.
But I will be damned if I get on stage and didn't make progress from my last physique. That's another thing too. People serial compete. They'll do like 4, 5, 6 shows in a calendar year, or
Yeah.
like that's a whole other can of worms. Eating disorders in the sport. There's like a lot of other things that play into it. But unless my body's ready, I won't get on a national stage. Fingers crossed for hopefully around the same time as when I competed in 2021, but we shall see.
Very nice. Well,
Thanks.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll be looking forward to following up with you and seeing how things are going.
Good luck with that.
And so for the people out there who do watch this, where can they follow you if they want to check you out?
Instagram at Alyssa_aesthetically, not aesthetics like skin, aesthetics like how you look. AES.
Okay. Well, awesome, Alyssa. Thank you very much for joining us. Really insightful. It's awesome to hear from the other side of the aisle about controversial topics like PEDs. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me and letting me ramble.
No problem. Anytime. Talk to you soon.
Bye.